Okay, so funding panel. So we've obviously got a lot of brain power and dry powder in terms of cash on this table. I want to start with quick introductions about what each of your organizations or funds does. Maybe just give us a few sentences. Robbyn, I'll start with you. Tell us about one of the biggest funding agencies in Canada.
Thank you. So again, thanks for the opportunity to be here. I'm just 2 months into my job, so if I'm saying anything wrong about NSERC's funding, please correct me offline, and then I'll it'll be part of my learning process. But all this to say, NSERC has a suite of funding programs that are all based around research partnerships, and so in any year, about 4,000, NSERC facilitates and supports 4,000 research partnerships with academics, with the private sector, with the not-for-profit sector, and more broadly internationally. So really where we're playing, in addition, in complementing our discovery portfolio of fundamental science support, this is really, we're focusing on research partnerships. Our flagship program, the Alliance program, funds partnerships with private sector, and in particular where private sector puts cash on the table, and we match that cash one-to-one. There's a number of other programs you've heard already this morning or earlier about Eye to Eye, Idea to Innovation, which again is a smaller program supporting scientists in academia to try and get to the next phase of building out their idea, whether it be prototyping, market validation, that sort of thing. And this is where NSERC is partnered with Lab to Market to help bring that initiative forward, and as well as in the BUILD program.
Awesome, thank you. And the other big funding agency of Canada, Mitacs. Can you tell us a bit about Mitacs, Ridha?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for the opportunity. To be here today. We have been supporters of the L2M program for many years now, and I was impressed by many of the presentations that were done earlier today. So we see the outcome of all that work that has gone into the L2M program. So Mitacs is a national organization that's funded by the federal government and the 10 provincial governments and the Yukon territory. What Mitacs does is basically fund partnerships between academic groups and the private sector and not-for-profits. We have about 100+ business development people that are spread across the country. They visit companies, they see what kind of issues they have, and then they try to match them with academic groups that can help them resolve those issues. These partnerships are intended to help industry, to help not-for-profits grow and expand, but also match them with the required skills from the academic side and provide training opportunities for graduate students, for postdoctoral fellows, and even undergraduate students and college students. So we use these programs to provide extra training so that they are exposed basically to problems in the private sector. They enhance their skills and all. Mitacs does about 20,000 internships a year across Canada and internationally. So it's a fairly sizable program that runs from coast to coast. And part of our programs are international, where we match basically groups from within Canada to do partnerships with groups from any countries around the world. We have a certain number of partnerships that we emphasize where we provide Canadians funding to go outside of the country, or vice versa for others to come into Canada. So that's in a nutshell basically what we do.
Awesome. And just as a note, I know they both briefly mentioned it, but NSERC and Mitacs have partnered with Lab to Market and helped us deliver the funding. As a matter of fact, Mitacs was with us since day one. So special shout out to both Mitacs and NSERC for making Lab to Market a possibility. Okay, to switch from the public side, I want to now go to Scott. You're one of the partners at RiSC Capital, one of the only real deep tech. And when I say only real Deeptech. There's a lot of people who claim that they do, generative AI or high-level AI arbitration tools and consider themselves Deeptech, but Scott works on something fundamentally different in addition to all those things. So, Scott, do you want to introduce us to RiSC Capital a bit more?
Sure. Thanks, Harry. So RiSC Capital was founded by me and my partner, Colin Webster. Colin, wave his hand. We're active deep tech investors focused on Canada, although we did do our first U.S. hydrogen deal a couple of weeks ago. Also, Cameron Clowley's here. Our fund is, we've done 9 investments since launch. Colin and I are both engineers, and in our careers as angel investors and venture capitalists, one thing we noticed is that Canadian investors weren't good at taking technical risks. Now, I'm not being entirely fair to my colleagues in other venture firms, but being an engineer, I think Colin and I just see things very differently. We're not afraid to take big bets on groundbreaking technologies. Of the 8 active portfolio companies we have, 4 of them are commercializations. One with McMaster, one with one with Waterloo, one with SFU in Burnaby, British Columbia, and then I'm missing one with the hatchery at the U of T. And Peregrine Hydrogen came out of Bill Gates's Orca's energy lab. So we're here because we believe in what we're doing here in the IBZ, and we want to fund more deep tech entrepreneurs.
Awesome, thank you. And last but not least, I convinced Alroy to be on this panel about 15 minutes ago. But Alroy has been a friend of mine for more than a decade now. We ended up building our companies together out of Velocity, and it's gone full circle. Alroy's the director of deep tech at Velocity. But what's also interesting about Velocity is they've spun out a fund and have been growing that ecosystem for ever since I can remember. So tell us a bit more about Velocity and the creation of this fund.
Sure. I'll see how good I do with only a couple minutes to prepare here. But Velocity has been around since 2008. It is the startup support system at the University of Waterloo. We've got programming that happens on campus to inspire students, whether undergraduate, graduate, PhD, to pursue their ideas and turn those ideas hopefully into businesses. That's what happens on campus. We also have an incubator in downtown Kitchener, and that's where once you've decided that you're ready to build a company and a big company at that, you'd likely apply to the incubator where we have a lot more support available. So a couple things that are interesting about Velocity is that we've got a tremendous amount of space that startups use as their home base, sometimes for many, and I can say this on behalf of Harry and myself, many, many years. I think we were there 4 years, you were there I think 4 or 5. Yeah. And that entire time, we do not charge rent, we do not take equity, and that space is not just office space and meeting rooms and all of that, but we've got tens of thousands of square feet for wet chemistry and biology, as well as hardware development as well. So the fund that Harry alluded to, so I'm here representing Velocity, but Akash, my colleague, was supposed to be the person in this seat. He's one of the 2 GPs at the Velocity Fund. Though we share a name, it's a completely separate entity. We work very, very independently. But the fund is sort of spun out of this idea that we needed more ways to support companies pre-seed, get them the initial funding that they need, as friendly funding as possible at the earliest stages when they, most of the time, don't really know where to go, who to talk to for funding. So Velocity used to have a fund that was part of the university. This was actually based on a donation by Ted Livingston, who was the founder of Kik Messaging, that started out of Velocity back in 2008 or 9. But there was all sorts of challenges with operating that fund out of the university, which is essentially a charity. And so earlier this year, after many, many years of working on this, they were finally able to spin out the fund as a completely separate venture capital firm.
Okay, So as you can tell, we've got a very diverse panel here, and this is by design. Usually, if you were to think of a funding panel, we just fill the stage up with VCs, but we haven't done that for two reasons. One, we wanted to be really sure that the folks on the stage were investing in deep tech, and then second, this is the diversity that it takes to sort of build this ecosystem, right? It's academic partnerships, funds spinning out of universities. We've seen that happen a few times now, and then the traditional, private investor VCs. So at the ecosystem level, and I want to throw this question to the panel, how have you seen the investment landscape change when it comes to deep tech? And I want to use one of the slides that Wes showed earlier. There's this valley of death before, these entrepreneurs will hit the market but exit the university. And it seems like that gap has always existed, but maybe it's gone shorter. But how have you seen the funding infrastructure or the funding landscape change to address that valley of death? Maybe I'll start with Alroy, since you have the mic.
I'd say that apart from the creation of a few new funds like RiSC, I would actually argue that there hasn't been enough change to how we fund, especially deep tech companies within Canada. Government programs, whether through NSERC, Mitacs, many others, they come and go every year. There's new programs, and they provide a lot of value. My company wouldn't have survived the first couple of years if it wasn't for that. But I would say that there's probably still significant work left to be done in order to get companies through that valley of death. And I can say that because every single deep tech company that I coach, that's their number one problem. Now, it's not a problem that would ever go away, but it's our job to be helping to smooth that out.
Yeah. Robbyn, I want to go to you. We've talked about this earlier at breakfast, this idea of the valley of death and the programs like I2I and others from NSERC that are pushing just beyond the traditional academic or research-based funding. What has been your thinking, and more broadly even NSERC's funding? I know I'm putting you in a spot given how new you are to NSERC, but what has been your take?
Well, I guess I can take a little bit of a step back from having spent 20 years at ISED and in that strategic policy space for science policy. I think Wes showed sort of this path of various reports and panels, all trying to try and crack that commercialization conundrum that Canada seems to have. And you saw the metrics that we still continue to lag competing partners in commercialization. And so, having worked in the Prime Minister's Advisory Council on Science and Tech, they had an expert panel on commercialization. And so that was 15, 20 years ago. We had the Jenkins panel more recently. We're continuing, we as the federal government are continuing to look at different ways to try and improve that commercialization challenge. I think a big part of it is around business investment in R&D, but at the federal level, more recently, a lot of changes have happened within innovation, science, and economic development. So the main funding partner for business R&D, and that's through the creation of, through the Innovation Skills Plan, the creation of Innovation Canada, the Strategic Innovation Fund, looking more at building ecosystems around the global innovation clusters. More recently, also taking some targeted investments in areas like quantum AI through national strategies, a national genomic strategy. With the pandemic, looking at biomanufacturing and life sciences. So taking more targeted investments rather than, with NSERC funding, it's bottoms up very much and it's investigator driven, whereas the funding more in terms of what's delivered through ISED is business focused, business led, and with some targeted initiatives. The other sort of big kind of elephant in the room, let's say, is this Canada Innovation Corporation that was announced last budget or 2 budgets ago. Big investment. They're in the process of standing up this independent agency to help improve Canada's innovation capacity, growth, more innovative companies. And I think, we're seeing IRAP will be rolled into that. I don't know what that's going to ultimately look like, but it's definitely something to continue to watch. And I think it's a novel experiment that the federal government is taking a bit of a risk on a completely different approach to how the federal government supports business R&D and tries to get at that commercialization challenge. And we'll see.
Yeah, that's great. I think also NSERC made a very interesting strategic decision maybe over a decade ago of focusing a lot more on applied research compared to fundamental research. I mean, of course, a lot of fundamental research still happens, but now we're starting to bear the fruits of that in that we've realized that Lab to Market is seeing the fruits of this applied research looking to have a commercial home. And I think that's something that gets slept on just because it happened such a long time ago and the cycle of change has been so long. I think this was very smart about what NSERC did, not just then, but now it's catching up to via the I2I programs and the other programs that you're running. On the Mitacs front, it seems that Mitacs has been around for quite some time and has been funding not just your traditional research, but also this gap of business or entrepreneurs who are looking to have a research background and hiring, not just hiring as companies, but entrepreneurs who might want to spin out their technologies. Of course, you've been a backer of Lab to Market, but how have you seen the ecosystem evolve?
Yeah, so obviously the ecosystem has evolved quite a bit. I started at U of T as a professor in 1997. And when I walk down the street now, I see the Mars Discovery District. I walk to TMU. I see the zones and all of that. It's quite different ecosystem from what it was at that time. So as Robbyn indicated, there is now clear recognition by the federal government and provincial government that there is a gap that needs to be covered. So at Mitacs, obviously we have been working on that because of where we stand in the continuum of innovation, that we certainly want to cover part of that gap or that gap, to the extent we can, obviously. It's a huge gap. So one of the programs we introduced some years ago, about 5-6 years ago, was the Accelerate Entrepreneur, which is basically a program that supports innovators, people, students and faculty members that want to develop their own startup, and we fund them through our programs. This implies that there is a conflict of interest here, because obviously, the professors are partly the owners, the inventors, and they get some of the funding. So we work with the universities, with the academic institutions to manage the conflict of interest so that a third party enters into play to actually deal with the financials and get the money and manage the money for them, right? And this has had significant growth across Canada. Starting with few projects, they go now into the hundreds per year across Canada. And it does have implications in the sense that many of the academics that get funded by Tri-Council or by industry, they start thinking about the usefulness of what they do, about actually also developing a new IP, about patents, about following up on something they have done in the past all the way to commercialization, because they have this opportunity and support to actually move it forward. So all of this has led to significant growth that we have seen in many academic institutions, where many researchers, many labs now don't just focus on publications, They also focus on IP development. They focus on finding ways to move things through the innovation path forward and try to commercialize it. So even with simple programs like that don't actually take a lot of money, you see a refocus of their research into something that is more tangible, that may have impact on the local economy or on the economy of the country as a whole. So.
Yeah, I just want to hone in on one point that you made. That's a really good one. Traditional academia, the thing you're optimizing for is the number of publications, usually. But one of the things that you mentioned is Mitacs help shift the focus away from not just that, but also on other opportunities. How has that been at a cultural level? That seems like a big cultural change.
Well, the good thing is that, the PhD students, the master students, the PDFs are interested in that, right? So in my case, when I first started my career at U of T, most of my PhD students wanted academic positions when they graduate. Almost none today wants an academic position. They all want to get involved in some high tech and developing their own venture and pursuing opportunities with big, high-tech companies and all. So there is a shift. There is a significant shift in the innovation space in terms of what people see the future is, and I think providing them with support and indicating to them that this is important and it's a good way forward can go a long way to continue to encourage them. In terms of the academic institutions, I think they also encourage it. Publications are still dominant in terms of how people are promoted and all, but if one has patents, if one does commercialization of research, or it's very much appreciated. I would say at least as much as publications, if not even more. So there is a shift in the academic world across Canada.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Robbyn, anything to add? This is your domain as well.
So I think commercialization activities, knowledge mobilization efforts are being increasingly recognized by the leadership in post-secondary institutions. I think we've got a ways to come yet still, because it's still very much that publisher parish, especially when you think about folks that have to write grant applications. That's very baked into the system. Within NSERC and the partnerships, especially programming, we're really trying to shift the needle and move the dialogue in terms of what's the impact of the partnership and the impact of the research, rather than how many publications did you get, how many conferences did you go to. So certainly in the partnerships aspect of the suite of programs, it's very much more on the impact. Just one additional thing. I had mentioned the Alliance program. It's a cost sharing with industry. There's a subset of that, which actually is very much in the space of public policy, impact, societal benefit. And instead of having a private sector partner, it's academic partnerships with a not-for-profit, for example, with a government department or agency, where we're really looking at having that societal impact of the research. And so there's no matching requirements, there's no other partners putting cash on the table. It's really looking at that societal benefit. I think it's a program that's fairly new to NSERC, happened during the Alliance consolidation of all the partnership programs. There will be a rebranding exercise that'll happen in the coming months, where we're hoping to really get out to the community to understand that there is a funding stream for those who want to, not necessarily have a commercial pathway, but still have that societal benefit, recognizing what you're saying about this next generation of really are looking at what's the impact of my research and how can I make a difference.
Scott, you work with folks that have come out of these academic institutions. You're very special in that sense that you as well as Colin have a technical background and allows you to invest in deep tech. But at the same time, I can count on my hand the number of deep tech investors that private investors that exist in Canada. Yeah, tell us more about the VC landscape and how that is changing.
So Colin and I have I think there are two other funds that I would call deep tech funds. One is Charles and his colleague Jennifer from the BDC. And another one would be the government of Quebec's Boreal Ventures and David Charbonneau. Both very smart with technical folks making deal decisions. And that's refreshing to see, Harry. But it's depressing also as a Canadian to see that we can't do more. And one of our first deals was led by DCVC, which is an epic fund out of San Francisco and other locales that Colin had a connection with. These guys sort of wrote the playbook for deep tech investment maybe 15 years ago or so, and they continued to execute super well. And as a Canadian, seeing dollars going into extracting resources, hydrocarbons, minerals from the ground, there's only so much of this you can do, and they will drive our GDP per capita up. But the sort of deals that Colin and I and Charles are doing, these are the 100x potential deals. And as a Canadian, it's a bit disappointing that we can't do more. The other thing I'd add is that you can be a deep tech fund. It's really driven by the partners at the fund as well. Xanadu was originally funded, as far as I know, by some clever folks at OMERS, Jim Orlando and Ken Nickerson, both super technical people. Jim went to McMaster a few years before I did. And so despite OMERS not being a deep tech fund, they had the deep tech partners. And Alan Lau from Two Small Fish is here, co-founder of Wattpad. But before that, when I really got to know him, an engineer and a computer programmer. And so Alan and Eva are doing deep tech investing. So there's pockets of deep tech capital available, but it's nowhere near what it should be.
Before I ask my tough question, I just want to open up to the audience. Start thinking of questions. If you have a question, I'll come to you and put your hand up, and we'll come to you with a mic. Okay, I get that private capital in deep tech is scarce, and that there's a bit of a cold start problem. Government acts as an LP to multiple funds and so on. What else can we do? And we've got some folks from ISED and policy side as well. So we're open to listening with keen ears on this one. And maybe this is for Scott and Alroy. What can we do to help solve this cold start problem?
So when you say we, I'm going to take it as the country as a whole. And I think it starts with like our government, our leadership. The fact that Israel has claimed the title of Startup Nation and we have not thrown our hat in that ring, it starts with just defining who our culture is. Do we want to be that? And if we want to be that, then we'll start taking the steps toward it. And yeah, there's a cold start problem in terms of the lack of funding available, but we can also, the government especially not only can they solve that problem, but they can solve the inverse problem, which is reducing the cost of starting that business, not just giving them the money to spend on those costs. So the SHRED program has been watered down so much over the last long time. We can take a look at that. We can increase the small business tax deduction. There's all sorts of things that will allow making it easier and cheaper to file patents and to commercialize them. There's a lot that can be done if, as a country, we say, no, this is something that we believe in. We're committed to, especially in this age of, jobs being shipped overseas and automated and all of that sort of stuff. Okay, well, we want to, despite all of that happening, we want to increase our GDP per capita, and that can only come through increased productivity. And that comes most often through massive adoption of technology and the creation of that technology. And we can claim that title as the country leading that charge. Starts there.
Scott?
I mean, I don't really want to talk about public policy, and I think everybody in the audience is probably a believer in innovation and The government agencies that are here are big believers in what we're doing, and Robbyn's I2I NSERC granting program is a great source of deal flow for Colin and I on our fund. I think there is work that's starting. I've been paying more attention to it over the past 5 years. I think there's there's lots of public policy things we could do if there was a will to do that. I don't want to preach to this audience on that. I just think it's really listening to where true innovation happens and what kind of country do we want Canada to be that could be an innovation leader. Like having the United States as a case study, we can watch. The Americans are very good at deep tech investing, and so are the Europeans. We can watch what they've done well and what they haven't done well. And we can laugh at their political system and all these things, but we can be the chapeau of North America that's driving innovation. And they can have their own political issues down there, and we'll just be reaping the rewards where we can sell our wares down south. It's not that far. We talk the same. We have a similar accent. And it's a great way to take advantage of the United States down there that's still an economic powerhouse. And so I see a lot of room for innovation. I see a lot of fascinating professors and principal investigators that are doing wonderful things. And there was a talk earlier about judging academic success by the number of patents, and I've been on different committees that have advised the province of Ontario on what we should be doing differently in terms of commercializations, and is granting patents the biggest success. Unfortunately, in my career, it hasn't been. I've seen companies with 95 patents that have failed after raising multiple amounts of capital. And one may be a leading indicator, but it's more the patents that drive you up that TRL stack, the technical readiness level, and that indicate more commercial success, and maybe patents that are awarded in combination with industry. That gets exciting. Maybe that's a different metric we could have. I don't have the full answer though, Harry.
Yeah. I know it was an unfair question to ask, but I thought I'd ask it anyways. Any questions from the crowd? Oh, we've got one.
My name is Nathan. I'm from the Rocket Science for Catalyst. One of the challenges with the current funding landscape for deep tech companies is that we lose a lot of companies to the U.S. because fundraising tends to be a little bit easier for them down south. What do you feel is a near-term solution to kind of stem that loss, given the challenges of fundraising for deep tech companies here in Canada right now?
I'll just repeat the question just so everyone in the room can hear. So Nathan asked, we lose a lot of companies to our friends south of the border. What's a potential short-term, long-term solution so we make it easier? And they move there because for funding reasons. Is there a short-term solution? If so, what would that be? Did that about capture? Okay. Who wants to take that?
So while that is true,
That's okay.
we're gonna pretend like nothing happened. While that is true, there are advantages of staying here as well. And sometimes we just need to, first of all, inform and remind our founders of those advantages. So I know I was just kind of talking smack about the SHRED program, but like I have seen, and I encourage many teams to keep their engineering within Canada, but then have a sales team or sales and marketing or other aspects of the business in other places. Of course, there's challenges with that, but it's never been easier to run a remote or hybrid company than it has been now, and it's been done very successfully by many companies. So that is an option. Not to mention that we, like, all those engineers that we're losing to brain drain, it's not necessarily that they want to leave, right? They recognize all the political problems and all the disadvantages of leaving Canada. We just need to give them an opportunity to stay. Plus, we have the ability to bring in even more talent because we haven't kind of capped our visas and all the other things that the US has done in order to make it harder to bring talent into your business. So I'm not answering your question with a new idea. I'm just saying that it's less of a problem.
Anyone? Yeah, go for it, Ridha.
Yeah, so maybe I can give a little bit of my perspective. So I see the funding system in Canada as being a bit fragmented. Many of the allocations are relatively small in size, and the money spread out, as opposed to bigger amounts where success is rewarded. People are tested, or certain expectations are put forward, and if you actually achieve your milestones or what's expected of your company, then more money comes in. The system is not necessarily it's not set up that way. I see a lot of people going after small amounts here and there, and they spend a lot of time doing it as opposed to spending their effort on bigger chunks of funds and all of that. So,
Can I just add? Our strategy is, when we started the fund, part of our pitch to our investors was, let's keep the returns in Canada, and really it still is. But if I look at an entrepreneur in the eyes, like Christian from Xandu, for example, and I try to make a case for why you should only be funded by Canadian investors, I would run out of things to say very quickly. When Charles and his colleagues did the Xandu investment, they went in alongside Bessemer, a top-tier investor globally. Our strategy at RiSC is because we only have 10.7 million of capital under management. That's fine for our pre-seed and seed stage, but we'll go in alongside a DC VC term sheet, or the case of the deal that you and I were talking about, Harry, that 1517 was in. We loved the deal, and then Coastal came in, and we all made room for each other, and Coastal led the Asterisk funding. And we've of our 8 or 9 companies, probably at least half have a foreign investor in there. We welcome that. We as RiSC Capital, we want to be the beacon to them. We want to say we're the hometown talent, and we say, yeah, we do talk different than the Americans. We are very different creatures. It depends on who I'm speaking to. But and we want to be that beacon, that if they have RiSC Capital's money, that it's endorsed by the country, and we just need more to carry on.
Yeah, I know I'm the moderator and I'm not supposed to have opinions, but I do on this one. I actually don't like that we talk about this problem of capital in such a doom and gloom way. I actually think that we've made decent amount of progress. Yes, of course, more can be done, but I think we're starting to build this critical mass. And this is sort of part of the belief at Lab to Market. If we start building great entrepreneurs at the early stages, they will then be successful and will have, as Ted Livingston calls this, irrational capital that invests back in the entrepreneurs. And we're just getting more and more of that irrational capital, such that we won't be that backdrop by the government funding, and we don't only rely on that. We rely on other parts of the ecosystem. So I think we'll get there. And as a matter of fact, it's not just the money, but it's also, as Ajay Agarwal, the person behind CDL says, it's also the judgment that comes with that money. So I think there's a lot of things going for us, and while capital and judgment are global, we can still funnel them into Canada. Anyone have any questions? I have one more that I'll ask, and then I think Wes is going to hand wave me to shut up. Okay, quiet crowd. Okay. All of you work with tech transfer offices in different ways. Maybe Alroy, you work with them the least because you're from Waterloo and you don't really have to. But the rest of you, okay, we'll get to you then. So, yeah, what do you see as the role of the tech transfer office, and how have you been working with them in the various capacities? Robbyn, I'll start with you, given the work you've seen with the I2I program and similar.
Well, again, preface my comments with the fact that it's 2 months on the job, and I think Scott's probably much more well-versed in the I2I program and the types of proposals that are seen, but essentially it's really a lockstep partnership between the I2I application process, and it has to be vetted through the tech transfer office, because what we want to make sure is that if we're going to be investing in projects, there is that link back into the institution where there are resources available and supports for the PIs, the project proponents, the teams behind these proposals, to help them after they're guide them in their research, link them to the broader ecosystem, help them on intellectual property challenges and the like. And so that's why, you know, our policy has been really, you have to make sure that you have those connections with the tech transfer office. If I put on, you know, my old ISED hat, they're you know, such a tremendous resource. There are challenges, no question. I think with respect to the types of investments that go on into those institutions, and I can't remember who I was talking with earlier this morning. NSERC used to have a program, intellectual property management program, and it was direct funding to tech transfer offices to help them build their capacity. There were some metrics around IP patents, counting licenses and the like, and of course, with increased funding in the TTOs, the numbers, the metrics went up. Federal government said, great, we've achieved our objectives, don't need the program anymore. Unfortunately, some of the institutions kept on investing in those TTOs. Others who didn't have the resources got out of that business. And you know, some universities have a half an FTE to help build those bridges with academia or with the private sector. So I think that's something that I've seen in you know, on the policy side of things, looking at the UK, in that they've got a higher education innovation fund where there's a pot of money, a dedicated pot of money to support technology transfer offices. There's metrics associated with it, but they are investing directly in the TTOs. And you know, maybe that's something that we could look at as a country. Of course, that has a big price tag, but again, depending on where you want things to go, they're definitely you know, an integral part of that pathway, that commercialization, economic, societal benefit pathway.
Ridha?
Yeah, so while we deal a lot with the tech transfer offices in a couple of ways. I mean, one of them is when we establish the partnerships between industry and the academic institution is, in many cases, there are discussions in terms of IP and others. And I mean, we stay out of it, so it's basically some work we give to the tech transfer office to manage and to deal and to apply their policies and all. I mean, the other way in terms of ventures and entrepreneurship, we actually, I mean, support new ventures, but we support them if they are housed in incubators or accelerators owned by the academic institutions. So, I mean, we work almost exclusively with the incubators that are part of the universities, not outside incubators. So it's a requirement of our program that any funding that goes into new ventures, into startups, they have to be housed in an academic incubator, and they have the support of the incubator itself. It's part of the application process. So that's how we deal with them in a nutshell. I mean, other aspects include how we transfer money and all, but that's not relevant here. So, I mean, they are essential partners because they, I mean, we deal with, as an organization, we deal with 190 academic institutions across the country between universities and colleges. So, so having like a person at the tech transfer office here, maybe it's called IPO or another name that knows, understand our programs, the intricacies of them, is essential for us because otherwise things will get very complicated. So they are really an essential component of how we deal with the academic institution and with the ecosystem as a whole.
Great, thank you. Scott, Alroy?
Just a few quick thoughts. We've done quite a few commercializations, nowhere near as many as like a life sciences investor would do. And our models are going to be different when we work with the technology transfer folks. They're going to want me back up. Quebec government has got this figured out. They have one piece of paper or standard contract on commercializing for any university in the province. Way to go. Ontario, we're getting there. We have some inventor-owned schools that are very progressive that way, which are great to see. Maybe Waterloo is one of them, yeah. There's maybe 4 or 5 other ones. I'm not sure about TMU, John, if it's inventor-owned or not with its IP. All right, okay, so this is wonderful. Because capital will just root around any complexity. And if there's a school, and I'm just gonna pick on McMaster because I went there, not because I know anything about it, but if McMaster insists on a buyout clause and a certain % of equity and a royalty in the event of an acquisition that needs to be bought out and so on, it just hurts our brain. And we'd rather think about making a lot of money together and rewarding them for what they've contributed to the company rather than taking way more than their pound of flesh should be. So Ontario and other provinces have a long ways to go. The other thing I'd add, Harry, is pairing professors and grad students that want to commercialize something with folks from a business school or even a community college that has an entrepreneurship program can really pay off a lot. Because as one of the slides I think I saw earlier today, the #1 reason for failure is market fit. #2 is not enough capital. But #1 was market fit. And the business folks, students will help with that and want that experience.
Yeah, that's a really good insight.
Yeah, that's a program that I'm hoping to build at Waterloo. So my comment on this is true for all TTOs, but especially the ones in a university where there isn't a lot of startup support around them. I think tech transfer offices actually have a massive opportunity that they have available to be a concierge, to be a Sherpa for these startups, to guide them, because getting involved with all of the funding agencies, especially on the public side, and getting involved with trade organizations and all of these sort of large entrenched organizations that are there to help, but they need to be navigated. A founder doesn't have the capacity to do that or the time to even figure out, okay, I got to go talk to this agency because they run this program, and I can go talk to that one, and there's stacking rules, and there's this, and there's that. But if somebody can just say, all right, let's sit down for an hour, and I want you to tell me everything about your business, and I'm going to walk you through what I think the next couple of years are going to look like in terms of getting you funded and getting you in touch with the right organizations that can help you with sales, with this, with that. I think there's a massive opportunity there. But to Robbyn's point, they need more capacity, and we need to be investing in that capacity across all TTOs.
Yeah, those are really, really good points. Wes, how are we doing on time? Do I have time for one more? Okay, question from the crowd, final chance. If not, I will continue on. Wow, quiet crowd, very Canadian. Okay, at least some of you are laughing. Okay, this one's specifically for Scott and Alroy. You see a lot of entrepreneurs, and you focus on the problem of entrepreneur selection at large. And you spend a lot of time at the boots to the ground level, talking to a lot of folks. This is a two-part question. What do you look for in these entrepreneurs? And B, what are qualities that you see these entrepreneurs grow over time as their companies have scaled? Because both of you have seen multiple teams scale. So entry point and then growth.
Every question you've asked me, I've handed the mic away and then came up with more interesting points. And I feel like I'm going to do the same thing here.
We can go to Scott first if you want.
No. We'll go back and forth, I guess. So one thing that comes to mind right away, and it's true for all founders, and all businesses, not just deep tech, but especially true for deep tech, is founder market fit. So does this founder understand the market that they're trying to sell into? Do they understand the customer? And if not, well, then maybe they need to be in a program like Lab to Market where they can get embedded within that culture of, okay, let's go talk to people, right? So founder market fit, but then obviously, and this usually happens, but I'll point it out, is founder technology fit as well. So by nature of them trying to commercialize the research that they're probably doing in a master's program or something like that, that tends to be there. But what also comes along with that is this obsession on the technology. And just this week, I was talking to a founder where I was like, okay, so really cool demo. What you've been able to do in your spare time is incredible. But what would you do if this was not the right technology to solve the problem? Would you pivot into something else? And he was like, no, I kind of love this. And I'm like, well, I'm happy for you. You found something you're passionate about, and maybe this will work out. But you need to be also able to pivot sometimes into a related technology in order to actually get this out into the market and build a business. So an example from my background is that when we started our business, it was what you would call a deep tech company. We spoke to tons of industry experts, and they said, kids, go home, get a real job. You're going to need millions of dollars and an army of PhDs to tackle this. And we said, well, you know what? We've actually talked to enough customers that we know that they don't care how we solve the problem. They just want their problem gone. And so we pivoted it into a simpler technology, still highly related, but somewhat simpler, that we were able to get to market in 2 years rather than 10. And so not being obsessed with the technology exactly how you have planned it out in your head, but being open to letting your customers guide you, I think is a skill that I look for in founders at the earliest stage. And especially as I'm coaching them and they're learning more about what it's going to take to make this successful, it's something I try to continue to instill.
Awesome. Scott.
I definitely want to see that they're eccentric. I mean, I part of the reason we've got one of the greatest jobs on the planet of being deep tech VCs is we want to be a part of that eccentricity and the zigging when everybody else is zagging, and we want to feed off the passion of these entrepreneurs. An entrepreneur that calls us and says, "I'm gainfully employed at IBM. I in the United States, and I'd like to come back to Canada and start my own startup. Would you give me $1 million?" I mean, come on, like. It's we're gracious people, but there's no way that man or woman's getting a penny out of us. Honestly, though, there's a wise, I think it might be Mark Andreessen or it might be his partner Ben Horowitz that talked about the 3 things they look for in an entrepreneur, and it's really landed with me, and I'll just share it with the audience. It's grit, G-R-I-T. So that's, the hustle, the whatever it takes, it might not even have a degree. It doesn't really matter. 15, 17 kind of candidates. And
I don't have a degree also.
Right, that's how I like to hear. So grit is number 1. Tells a narrative is number 2. So they're storytellers. They can get people to believe in what they're doing. They can make eye contact. They can connect with the right people and make that connection. And the third one is a bias to action. And that's, Charles, you and I speaking about that entrepreneur this morning that would be awake between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. working his butt off, but maybe spend some time with his family during the business day. It works for that individual and super successful entrepreneur, and it's hustle, like hustle in the best way, the stuff that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up when I think about it. The greatest entrepreneurs I've invested in will send me emails at 2 in the morning on a Saturday just because they wanted my thoughts on something. And I'll do my best to reply before 6 a.m. I might not be awake when they're right, but that's what I look for. Awesome.
Well, thank you for that very, very interesting conversation, the insights that you provided. It was a pleasure being on the panel with each of you. Crowd, please give a warm round of applause for the panel.